Good morning, everybody. I'm Jonathan Doster from the Illinois policy team here at the Ounce, and in a few minutes you'll hear from me again. I'm going to be delivering a dry and wonky legislative update that probably everyone will be bored about. But before that, we wanted to actually introduce Representative Tom Demmer to give a few words. Representative Demmer has been serving in the House of Representatives here in Springfield since 2013. He's from the 90th District up near Dixon, near Rockford. He's a really big champion for early learning. He actually sits on two appropriations committees that we care about deeply, Education and Human Services, and I'm going to turn it over to Representative Demmer for a few minutes, so thanks.
Well, welcome to Springfield. Welcome to your capital. As Jonathan mentioned, I've been down here for just a couple of years, and in that time we've seen quite a few advocacy groups come down. And I want to let you know you got the first thing right. Everybody's wearing a bright, easy-to-see shirt. You won't be able to lose each other in the Capitol. You'll be able to make every hallway we walk through, every legislator you see is going to understand just how large of a group you all have down here today to advocate for early childhood education. So that's a very strong showing, and thank you all for coming down to the Capitol. I drove down to Springfield this morning. I left my home at about 5:30 this morning, and as I like to take that drive in the morning, and it's quiet, there's nobody on the road, and you kind of watch the sun come up and get a chance to think a little bit about what's going to go on in Springfield this week and all the challenges and all the issues that we face. And I know that you're focused on one aspect of that in early childhood education. And it's a challenge for you to come down here, I think, because there's so much happening. There's so much going on. There's so many issues facing the state. But I thank you for being here because you're able to help us as legislators connect names and faces and programs and hear stories about the impact and the good work that you do. And that's a very important thing. It's difficult, as Jonathan mentioned, I sit on both the Human Service Appropriation Committee and the K-12 Education Appropriation Committee. That's a large part of the state budget. That's well over half the state budget. And when you're going through countless programs and countless lines talking about projects that are happening in every corner of the state, intervening for millions and millions of Illinoisans, it's difficult to keep all that straight. And so when we have the ability to actually hear firsthand from you who have been touched by these services, who provide these services, and who are strong advocates for it, that makes a big difference. I'm really pleased to be here today because when I first came to the legislature, Ounce of Prevention was one of the first groups that really made an impact on me. I remember hearing from quite a few groups, especially on the human services side, which I have a little background in human services. I remember hearing from so many groups, and there are some very good stories to tell, but what really struck me about the Ounce of Prevention Fund was how smart the intervention was, how best practices were adopted from states all across the country, how measurable impacts were seen. But also, when you look at a lot of human service providers, I think that a lot of groups organize around seeing a specific problem and looking for a way to solve that problem. But sometimes when you're trying to solve just one narrow slice, you end up treating a symptom rather than focusing on a root cause. And so we see a lot of groups who come down year after year and are providing good work and who are trying and are working towards an admirable goal, but a lot of times it seems like we're focusing on the symptoms and not actually going for what the root cause might be. And the Ounce of Prevention, looking at early intervention, looking at early childhood intervention, is such a promising step to take because we're not just looking at solving a problem, we're looking at changing an entire trajectory of a young person's life, with the ideal outcome that in the end you may not know that a problem ever existed in the first place. And what a powerful story that is, and what a powerful tribute that is to the work that you do. So I appreciate you very much being here and the work that your folks in Springfield do to advocate on behalf of the efforts that you have, and also each of you who are working every day to do this work. It makes a big impact to us. We all know the state's facing some very difficult challenges in a lot of areas right now. We know the state needs to change its own trajectory so that we're not living in an annual cycle where you have to come down and plead your case every year, and we're not budgeting anymore in a perpetual crisis mode. There's some very difficult decisions that have to be made in the short term. But with a group like yours, a group that's so focused on the future, so focused on what can be and how we can make promising long-term investments that are in the best interest of the people of Illinois, I think you have a very compelling and very powerful story to tell here in Springfield today. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you. I'll look for you, all of you in your yellow shirts today at the Capitol, and God bless the work that you do. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Representative Demmer. Really, what he touched on is really what I'm going to echo, essentially. But I wanted to take a quick survey of the room to find out where everyone is from. And can you just raise your hands? Is anyone here from downstate Illinois? Yay, downstate. Is there anyone from the western Illinois area? Me, yay. Is there anyone here from central Illinois? Okay. And then anyone else from the Chicagoland or northern Illinois region? Is there anyone not from Illinois, but who still came to advocate? No? All right. Thank you again. If this is the first time you've attended an advocacy day, I would just like to say welcome. And again, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to participate in this. If you've been here before, welcome back. We're happy to have you again and happy that you decided to return. And I also just wanted to remind you that many of you are seasoned advocates. You may not feel that way and you might not realize that you are. But if you've ever helped family receive services, if you've ever stood up for any kind of injustice, if you've ever attended a parent-teacher conference, you have already been advocating. Advocates are so important because they help paint the picture of what is happening on the ground in Illinois. The ounce advocates on behalf of children and families, but it's your stories that we're sharing. It's the experiences you go through every day that we share. So we couldn't be more happy to have you here in person to share these very personal stories with not only your colleagues, but also with your lawmakers. And I just want to remind you, some of you might be a little bit timid or a little bit nervous to speak to your lawmakers. But remember, what you have to say is important. You're here for a reason. We need to let lawmakers know what's happening in Illinois and what exactly you're experiencing. As Representative Demmer mentioned, Illinois is facing tough financial times. However, as they're looking at the budget, as they're looking for numbers to cut, we need to remind them that these aren't numbers. They are cutting programs and services for children and families. And we need to make sure that we speak up and let them know that we don't agree with that. And next, I actually want to introduce someone. I want to introduce someone who knows a lot about advocating. We have the pleasure today of having a parent who is willing to speak and share her advocacy story. I would like to introduce Christy Happ. She is a parent from Schaumburg Community School District. Christy will share her advocacy story with us today. She has previously attended Advocacy Day, and we'll just highlight a little bit more about the importance of advocating and how empowering it can be. So, Christy.
Well, hi everyone. I hope you're all enjoying your lunch. My name is Christy Happ, as she's already said. It's an honor to be here speaking to you today. I am the proud parent of three beautiful children. My oldest daughter is 21. My son is 7 years old, and my youngest daughter is 4. Both my younger children have been in the early childhood program in the Schaumburg District 54 school district, early childhood program. And this program has been instrumental in their education. My son, unfortunately, did not, because of all the waiting lists and the lack of funding, he didn't get to go into the program until he was already 4, right before he had to go to kindergarten that fall. So, but with the help of the early childhood teachers and the kindergarten and first grade teachers, he's in first grade now, he's up to grade level, so, and he's doing well in school now. So, on the other hand, my younger daughter, she has been in the early childhood program for 2 years, and it's incredible to see the difference between my son and my daughter, how well she's doing and how much she has developed. That extra time in the classroom at that early age, it just means it's incredible. It's a lot of people the people that know me know that I'm very involved in both of my children's PTA, and I believe that my kids can't talk for themselves right now because they're very little. They can't speak up. So I'm their voice. I'm the one that's here to make sure that they can have a good education, because I believe everybody, all the kids, deserve a good education. And no matter if they have a good financial or bad financial situation. So I think that parents, educators, taxpayers, everyone it's our responsibility to fight for them, to speak for them. So let's go out to the Capitol building today and advocate for our children's future, and hopefully get the legislators to get funding for early childhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy, for sharing your story. As she mentioned, I mean, these programs, I mean, you guys know, I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but really this is the message we need to be taking this afternoon to our lawmakers, letting them know how important these programs are and the difference it makes. So next we will actually show a short video. And I just wanted to preface it a little bit with, although the fact that this video focuses on programs and services that are offered specifically by the Ounce, I want you to see yourself as part of this work, because this video describes how access to quality early childhood programs can really make a difference. But I feel like a part that sometimes gets a little bit forgotten is how it affects parents and families. Although the program is for the children, it can have a really positive impact on parents and families. And once again, just to highlight, see yourself as a part of this work as we champion and are here to celebrate you today, parents, caregivers, teachers, administrator, providers, home visitors, anyone and everyone that is involved with early childhood programs. We would like to say thank you and just continue sharing the story. And now we'll play the short video.
Grows up in poverty and risks having their greatness hidden away. It's there in every child. Greatness, potential, a world of abundant possibility. It just needs inspiring, encouraging, and positive relationships to fuel it. But nearly 1 in 4 children in our country grows up in poverty and risks having their greatness hidden away. At the Ounce, we know that what kids absorb before they're 5 is mind-boggling. Fact is, when you talk to a child in the early years of life, exposing them to as varied a vocabulary as possible, the more you dramatically improve their development. We believe that inspiring, encouraging, and educating children profoundly shapes the people they become. Our work combines research, science, and passionate people to nurture potential in every child. We educate children from birth to light the fire within. We train educators to cause a ripple effect. We empower young moms to head in a positive direction. We advocate for young children to cause a wave of change. When you invest in children from the day they're born, it multiplies, creating a prosperous society for all. Now imagine if every child was nurtured from the day they were born. How great could our future be? At The Ounce, we're taking our proven approach across the nation to help even more children in need. But we need you, your time, your support, your energy. Launching brighter futures takes us all. Join us today.
How's everyone doing? Is everyone sleepy, or are you feeling better now that you've had your lunch? Kind of the same, maybe? Okay. I just want to go over a few logistical items. It looks like most of you do have your lunch and are eating it. But I also wanted to just make sure that everyone had their participant folder. If you don't have it, or for whatever reason there's a mistake, please feel free to go just right outside the ballroom, find someone with a purple shirt, and they're more than happy to help you. For those of you that do have your folder, I did just want to go over the materials. So some of you may have noticed, just by simply opening your folder, you have an agenda. There is also an emergency contact information. If you have any questions, the phone number that's listed on there is mine, so you'll be hearing from me. But I also wanted to make sure, just to take a step back, that everyone here has signed a media release. If you haven't, please find a staff member and we will provide one for you. We will be taking pictures and asking for interviews, which is why we need to make sure everyone, in fact, does sign one. But now to go through your actual folder materials. As I mentioned, all of you do have an agenda. If you rode a bus from Chicago, you just need to make sure that you're back at the State House in around 1:45, because the buses will be departing promptly at 2. If you took a bus out that was not from Chicago, just make sure you're in touch with your bus coordinator and they can let you know what time your bus will leave. So your folder will actually contain, on the left-hand side, face sheets of your senators and representatives. Again, if for whatever reason you don't have these, please visit our troubleshooting table, which is just outside the ballroom. But these face sheets will actually tell you where the offices are located for your representative and for your senator. It'll provide the Springfield office, but also their district office. In addition, behind these fact sheets will be additional information. Some of it might be specific about your district. Some of it might be general about Illinois. And I just wanted to let you know, too, that the information we provided is from the Illinois State Board of Education. Therefore, it doesn't cover all early childhood programs. They only cover a few, so that's why it's just a brief snapshot. Also, you'll find maps of the Capitol building. The Capitol building map is actually two-sided. And then there's an additional map, which is for the Stratton building, which is a separate building. However, if you look at the Capitol building map on the first floor, there are two places where it indicates how you can get to the Stratton building in case one of your lawmakers is located there. Next, you'll see three separate sheets on yellow paper. So these yellow sheets, you'll actually find that they're duplicates. And these sheets are sheets that you can provide to your senator and your representative when you speak to them. If you aren't able to speak to them and go to their offices, you can leave them behind with their administrative assistants and your contact information. So after the presentations wind down, you can either stick around for an additional advocacy training, or you are more than welcome to depart to the Capitol with the first group of people. If you do, in fact, depart for the Capitol building, first they will take you to the Capitol building where you will, you can contact, sorry, that was a little distracting, something fell. Where we will first take you to the legislative floor. If you brought business cards with you, great. If you don't have any, that's okay too. Ounce staff members have blank cards. If you do have to call your lawmaker off the legislative floor, you simply hand them your business card and write the name of your lawmaker, or if it's a blank card, write their name and write your name on the other side. You can hand it to the attendant outside of the legislative floor, and they can call your lawmaker. But don't worry, we can go over this again, and Ounce staff members will be available to help you. In addition, si necesitan ayuda en español, me pueden encontrar a mí, Sandy, Angélica, Allie, o Diana. So nosotras hablamos español. So just, there's some Spanish speakers. I'm here, guys. And lastly, please take all of your personal items out of the room when you do leave. We will be leaving the ballroom unlocked. Therefore, you're more than welcome to come back once you're done if you'd like, or you can depart for the day. However, again, I wouldn't advise you leaving any personal items just because the ballroom will be left unlocked. So lastly, before I hand it over to my coworker, Jonathan Doster, he'll go over a little bit more the legislative priorities and a little bit more about early learning topics too. But again, I just wanted to thank you guys for being here. I think it really speaks volumes, the fact that this room is so tight to walk around because there are so many of you. Again, I just can't stop saying thank you. Please feel empowered to speak up. You being here alone sends a really big message, but remember to speak to your lawmakers and just speak from your heart and let them know what you feel, how this affects you, and why these programs are important. So up next, Jonathan Doster.
Thanks, Carmen. Hey, everybody. Again, it's Jonathan Doster from our Illinois policy team here at the Ounce. And first, before I dive into the legislative update, I just wanted to say how thrilling it is to see so many early learning advocates in the room. So give yourselves a big round of applause. Yeah. We're supposed to be hyping you up, and that's as hyped as I get. So today's overview is the focus of the overview is going to be on the state budget and how it impacts early learning. We're going to be talking about the Early Childhood Block Grant within the State Board of Ed, as well as a number of programs under the Department of Human Services, including the Child Care Assistance Program, the Early Intervention Program, and a couple of home visiting programs funded through DHS. So you should have in your folder a handout. It's yellow. It says Governor Rauner's FY16 proposed budget on the top. That's both for your use and to give to lawmakers, and it outlines the governor's proposed FY16 budget as it relates to these early learning programs. And I'll say as a preface before we dive into the specifics that you should feel comfortable to talk about as many or as few of these budget areas as you feel comfortable. We don't want to force you into anything that you're uncomfortable doing, but you should also feel empowered to talk about the programs with which you are familiar. So let's start. The governor's proposal for his FY16 budget was released in February. The one positive piece of it is that he actually proposed to increase the early childhood block grant funding by $25 million. We at the Ounce see this bump to be a positive first step. It's a part of a larger increase to education funding. There are a couple problems with it. We at the Ounce have been actually advocating for a $50 million increase to the block grant, in large part because the block grant itself has been cut by $80 million since fiscal year 2009. So we know that we were already serving fewer children than we want to be serving, and we've been cut over the last number of years. And so while a $25 million increase is a positive step, we're still fearful that it's not enough. The other piece is that the state actually committed to increasing the block grant by $50 million as part of this federal grant program called the Preschool Expansion Grant. And I think that there actually may be some folks from communities that are receiving some of this federal money here in the audience. And so I have, it's not in your folders specifically, but I have fact sheets on the preschool expansion grant, and you can come find me after our presentation today if you want to talk to lawmakers about this important funding and what you're going to be using the money for. So I'm, again, Jonathan, you can come find me afterwards. The last thing I'll say about the block grant is that everybody here in the room can actually be talking to their lawmakers about the need to increase the funding for this really important project or program. As you know, it funds our state preschool program as well as some infant toddler programs through the State Board of Ed. So that's the first bullet point. The second one that I'm going to move to is our DHS-funded home visiting programs, those otherwise known as Healthy Families Illinois and Parents Too Soon. In Governor Rauner's budget proposal, again, that came out in February, both budget lines were level funded, meaning that they're receiving the same appropriation that they received last fiscal year. We believe that we must continue making the case to lawmakers about the need to at least provide level funding for these programs. One reason is that if we don't actually fund them at the same level as last year, we risk repayment of some federal dollars that we've received through the Maternal Infant Early Childhood Home Visiting Program, known as MCV. Some of you actually may know about MCV or being working in MCV communities. But if we are to cut those two home visiting programs in the Department of Human Services, we actually risk repayment of about $40 million to the federal government. So it's really important that we make sure that that money is secure for this coming fiscal year. The other piece is that those budget lines have been level funded for a number of years, and as you all know, as parents and providers, it actually it doesn't cost the same amount of money year after year to run these programs. We're trying to increase the quality, the cost of care actually increases, and so level funding over time actually constitutes cuts, and so we want to make sure that we're talking to lawmakers about that fact too. Lastly, about the home visiting programs in DHS is that those of you who are involved in home visiting programs, either from a family side or from a provider side, we want you to talk to lawmakers about managing the budgets when you face either cuts or level funding, because I think a lot of times they're not actually sure what's happening on the ground, and it's those stories that you hold that are really important for them to hear. Irita and I can talk to them all the day about the state budget, but actually hearing the stories from the ground is really, really important. So that's the home visiting programs in DHS. I'm going to move over to the more problematic portions of the governor's budget proposal. He has made a few programmatic changes, proposed programmatic changes to the early intervention program as well as the child care assistance program. And if these proposals were actually made real, we know that we would be shrinking the reach of the programs and serving less children. So again, keep in mind that these are just proposals that were made in February. The General Assembly is beginning their process whereby they'll craft the budget for this year. But we want you all to be aware of them and to be talking to both the governor's office and lawmakers today about it. So for early intervention, the governor's proposal increases the percentage of delay a child would need to exhibit to be eligible services from 30% to 50%. What this means in layman's terms, I suppose, is that a 2-year-old would now have to have the functional abilities of a 1-year-old in order to receive these EI services. There's only 3 states and the District of Columbia in the country that have implemented such a restricted definition of eligibility. It's a really harmful proposal, in large part because we know that those children with mild and moderate delays, so the ones between 30% delay and 50% delay, are the ones who actually make the most significant gains in the EI program. And so we've been advocating vigorously against this proposal since it came out in February. Again, we already know we're serving too few children in EI, and we want to make sure that the eligibility criteria isn't shrunk to make, to shrunk. We want to serve more kids. Yeah. There's also an issue similar to the home visiting lines in the Department of Human Services. We're required by federal law to maintain our state investment in the EI program. Otherwise, we're going to be jeopardizing some federal funds. And so, again, if you're involved in the EI program at all, we're really concerned about this proposal, and we would encourage you to talk to lawmakers today about it. moving to the Child Care Assistance Program, or CCAP, the governor has put forth 3 programmatic proposals. One, it would be eliminating care for children over the age of 6. The second is eliminating payments for care provided by relatives in the home. And the third one is actually increasing family co-payments. All 3 of these are outlandish and potentially dangerous. And again, we've been advocating against these proposals, arguing that that these are cost-effective investments that only drive up other costs if we don't make them early. And so, again, if you're involved in CCAP, if your program receives CCAP subsidies, we want you to, if not get into the specifics of these programmatic changes, make clear that we need more money for the CCAP program as well as the early intervention program. Last thing I'll say about the budget is that we're deeply concerned about proposed cuts to other parts of the safety net on which many of our families rely. These are cuts to Medicaid. One of them in particular is the elimination of adult dental services. Last year, we actually fought to restore adult dental services in Medicaid, and the Governor Rauner's proposal would eliminate those services. Another another proposal that we'd be nervous about is the reduction of services towards the state over 18. And we're also concerned about cuts to mental health, housing, substance abuse, to name a few. So to the extent you want to talk about these items and the importance of helping the families we serve in early childhood, you should feel totally free to do so. If you want to stick to the early childhood specific issues, that's fine too. But I think that the key takeaway is providing stories about how these budget cuts or proposals actually impact your programming. That's the thing that we want you all to do today. Also in your packet, you should have a fact sheet with more info on our budget priorities, which I said earlier. You have a fact sheet about the harmful proposals to the early intervention program, and you should have a fact sheet about the maintenance of effort requirements for our home visiting programs. So I'm almost done. It's important to know that the Ounce, along with many of our colleagues here in Springfield, both in early childhood advocacy and then in other issue areas, are making the case that we can't craft the FY16 budget on cuts alone. The amount of revenue or funds brought in by taxes is currently $6 billion less than it was in fiscal year 14. And that's due to the rollback of the income tax rate. And so what the governor's proposal represents is one way to cut $6 billion from the budget. The reality is that none of us really want to live in a state with a budget that looks like the governor's proposal. So today we're asking, we've been asking lawmakers, and today we're asking you to ask lawmakers to enact revenue in order to fund critical state services like education and human services. I think all of us understand the importance of generating revenue and not building a budget on the backs of young people. So the budget fact sheet in your folder should provide some language for you to use if you're feeling like you're not exactly sure what to say. It's also a good leave behind if you're trying to find your lawmaker and they're on the floor or they're in another meeting. You can just leave it with their assistants. I think that's almost it for me. Ounce staff, as you can tell, are in orange shirt or purple shirts, and we'll be around the Capitol all day in case you have questions. And I'm going to pass it on to Irita.
Hi, guys. How are you? We're almost done talking at you. I hope that's okay. But we want you to feel prepared and to feel like you know what you want to say when you get over there. But very soon we're going to unleash you on the Capitol. Before I sort of close out with some thoughts about where to find your lawmakers and what today's schedule looks like at the Capitol, we have one other lawmaker that wanted to come and say hello to you, and that's Senator Dan Kotowski. Senator's from the 28th District, which is up in the northwest suburbs. His office is in Park Ridge. He's been down here since 2007, so has a few more years under his belt than Representative Demmer. And Senator Kotowski is a really important person for us. Senator Kotowski chairs Appropriations 2 in the Senate, which is where the State Board of Ed has its budget. So the Early Childhood Block Grant is under his purview as chairman. He is the vice chairman of Appropriations 1, which is where early intervention, child care, and home visiting is held. So we've talked to Senator Kotowski a lot. Sometimes he pays attention. Okay, that's very nice. He's very complimentary, too, to lobbyists. It's great. Senator is as a lobbyist, there are lawmakers who listen to you and are polite and ask questions, and there are lawmakers who you feel like get it in their gut when you talk to them. And I think Senator is a real champion for children, for vulnerable peoples, folks with disabilities. He fights very hard down here, day in and day out, and I know back home in his district too. So Schaumburg School District 54, wave at your senator. I want to make sure you know where they are. So without further ado, I want to let Senator Kotowski say a few words to you all. Please welcome him. You want to climb up first? You're going to help me first? I must be getting away.
No. This is a high podium over here. Irita Gasner is a phenomenal advocate for early childhood and for making sure that young people are able to get the education, the support they need. Known her for a long time. I used to call her Ireta for a long time. True story. And finally she looked at me and said, hey, it's Irita. So that's the type of person you want, who's going to say to you, if you're mispronouncing her name, pronounce it correctly, or you'll suffer the consequences. So here's the deal. This is the big challenge that we have before us, and it's a bigger challenge than you've ever had in the state of Illinois. And I want you to pay very close attention, because there are some people who think it's appropriate to use children as political pawns, right, in this game of balancing the budget. Well, that's wrong, right? We're not going to let that happen. The budget that we have, it's a moral document. It's a moral document, and it impacts real people. It's not just numbers on a paper. It's not just numbers on a paper. It impacts real people. And this is your opportunity to have your voices heard, to make sure that the people who make decisions every day, who are lawmakers, understand that when it comes to their decisions, that they need to be taking into account the actual impact on people's lives, on your lives. So when you see a lawmaker, look him or her in the eye and make sure they don't give you the short attention span theater that happens oftentimes here. That you shake their hand, you look them in the eye, you tell them who you are, you tell them your story, you tell them why this matters. I'll tell you something. Laws have been changed in this state, and funding has been sustained when one person comes up and they tell their story. When one person comes up and they get someone's attention, just because one person came in. Now look at all the people in this room here today. All the people traveled near and far. But make sure that you have people listening to you, that you're communicating in a very clear way about the impact of these programs. Look, the fact remains is we have a $4 billion deficit. $4 billion, and you can't cut your way out of that, right? You can't fill a $4 billion budget hole with cuts alone. Wouldn't you agree? Right? So the discussion is, for some people, it'll never be enough, right? It'll never be enough. And they want you to have this discussion about cuts and reductions alone. We don't want to have that discussion. We want to have that discussion about what we value, right? What we prioritize, what makes a difference. Because then someone has to tell you why it's not important, right? Because they'd rather have this discussion about, well, this is just going to allow us to balance the budget. Like when you're at home, when you're making decisions about you and your family, when you have a challenge, you may have a pot of money somewhere and say, you know what, I need this right now because there's an emergency, right? In the state of Illinois, some people aren't getting the message. One of the things that we did last week is to make sure we restore funding for autism in the state of Illinois, right? 15,000 children benefit from this program. And people are trying to say that this program, that we can't afford to fund it. Well, I'm here to tell you we can't afford not to fund it, right? We can't afford not to. Because at the end of the day, if we don't provide the support, if we don't provide the resources, what's going to happen? Where are these young men and women going to go? Where are these children going to go? What's going to happen to their families? What's going to happen in the community? This is the bottom line here. And people who make decisions about the budget need to understand, if you cut funding for early intervention, think about this last week. There was a young man who came to my committee and he talked about what an impact early intervention had in his life. He was able to be diagnosed with autism, got the services and support that he needed, got all the help, got all the treatment, and now he doesn't rely on any government support. He works, he's a taxpayer, he pays rent, he's living the kind of life he deserves to lead, right? And we deserve to give him that kind of life and deserve to give young and women, men and women across our state that kind of life. That's why you're here today. Make sure we convey that story. I mean, I'm on your side. I'm going to be advocating for you. I'm going to be fighting for you. I've said this is my hill to die on, and I mean that. This is my hill to die on, because at the end of the day, if we're not standing up for our kids, who are we standing up for, right? Are we standing up for the corporations who aren't paying any income tax? Or are we standing up for the kids? Who are we standing up for? Kids. If we're not standing up for families, if we're not standing up for young people, yet we're standing up for making sure we're giving givebacks, we're not having a fair and level playing field, who do you want to stand up for? I know why you're here, but you need to make sure that people like me are putting their money where their mouth is, right? Right? Then we need to step up. Well, I'm here to make sure you know there are people out there fighting and advocating for you, that I'm going to keep stepping up, I'm going to keep fighting, I'm going to keep advocating, and I'm going to make sure our kids have the quality of life they deserve, because we owe it to them, and that's the kind of state we need to make sure that they're living in now and in the future. Thank you.
He's the best.